Welcome back to the Zell Strength Podcast. This is your host, Jim Elli, and I don't have a co-host today because he is on a road trip. But luckily, we have Bryce Krawczyk in the building, or in the metaphorical metaverse. And we're going to talk a lot about his origins within Calgary Barbell. He's like I would say, I look up to how Bryce and Dylan have created their brand with quality as a priority. It's something that, I guess, as a powerlifter who's also an uber nerd in like tech, it's really nice because they make good content that's helpful, that also looks good. So we'll get into a lot of stuff. We'll talk about coaching, talk about the creative plans of the Calgary Barbell Domination Tour. That's unofficial. He's not said that. It's something that I'm visualizing in my head. Anyway, welcome to the podcast, Bryce. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chop it up, to chat and get through it, get into it, you know?
Yeah, I think the last time we talked was like in 2018 in Calgary for Worlds, which you had a pretty awesome performance that World. That was when you were pulling for the win with that. Was like a 370 pull that you're going for?
I was pulling for podium. So I was pulling to like get up into third at that point. But yeah, I don't know. I loaded something absurd, like 377 or whatever it was. I just told Mike, I was like, I don't care. Put it on the bar. I'll give it a shot. Like,
yeah. I actually thought I was going to talk about that, the gym first, but I'm kind of curious since powerlifting has kind of changed a little bit since even 2019. 2018 was when I last saw you. 2019, I don't think you competed at IPF Worlds 2019, did you?
2019,
you did Classic, didn't you?
I did Equipped Worlds.
Or
was
Equipped.
In Dubai.
Yeah. So since then, like, obviously pandemic happened. Has powerlifting for you as an athlete, like, changed? Like, has anything about it changed your perspective on it, motivation wise?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely had, ups and downs with it. So after Dubai in 2019, we had our CPU, or Canadian Nationals, pretty much right on the cusp of like the whole pandemic becoming a thing. We had heard rustlings and like, oh, there might be this weird thing, and this could turn into something. And we went and competed, and we still to this day, we think Dylan might have gotten it on the way home because he was
really?
Well, we didn't know. We went through the airports and whatever else, so presumably we're exposed to it, or potentially anyways. And Dylan got back and he was like laid up for 2 weeks. But I had the opportunity to compete and had like the meat of my life in equipment, squatted 400, pulled 400, chipped another couple kilos onto my bench. But yeah, I was able to kind of like have that, fuel me for a while through the pandemic and stuff. And was also lucky enough that, my wife's on the condo board. We have this condo where the basement is all concrete and there's just nothing in there. It's like a shared room, common room where they do condo board meetings and stuff. But obviously that wasn't happening because of the pandemic. So I was able to put my like comp rack and a couple sheets of plywood down there and pretty much train full bore for the entire pandemic. So I had some really productive training at first. And then as it tends to do, my hip flared up for a little bit and things got like really, really unmotivated and just like slogging through and feeling shitty and like no real drive because I didn't know when I was going to compete next or anything like that. So definitely went through a period of that and then kind of got it back together. I'd say like November 2020. From June to November, I think was like really rough. And then from November was able to build into a couple of meets last year and do North Americans and then IPF Classic Worlds, which were both pretty decent showings for me. 2.5 one way or the other might have meant something at Worlds in terms of making the podium and shit. But overall, yeah, it's been pretty good. But one thing that I definitely noticed coming back was just how much I missed competing. So taking such a big break from competing, and I usually only do, 2 meets a year. But getting back, going to Florida in whatever it was, June or July or whatever, for North Americans, and just like seeing my buddies from powerlifting, like there were a couple other Canadian competitors that I'm good friends with, and just like doing the damn thing, being out on the platform, seeing people helping out other lifters in the warm-up room, and just all of those things was just like, it kind of allowed me to do that thing that makes me feel like me, which I feel like I didn't have for a long time. So it's definitely, I don't know, I'm happy to be back to, hopefully looking forward to some more meets and having a few under my belt over the last little while. So yeah.
Yeah, it feels like with like motivation wise, people talk. So I've talked a lot about like self-determination theory on my Instagram, and it's been really helpful, like as a coach, to kind of understand, where people are at in terms of their motivation. Because yeah, as a coach, it's been like fluctuating. As an athlete myself, it's been fluctuating. Mm-hmm. It seems that competitions don't only serve as like a place to demonstrate, your competency and to like prove your abilities, but also, barring that you don't train at a big gym with a bunch of other powerlifters, that you have a community there. Like for yourself, you're training alone. And there's a lot of lifters that had trained in like their apartment and stuff. And then it's like they were looking forward to the competition, I think, so much, not only just for that ability to compete, but also to meet up with your friends, like you were saying, and like to do the thing that you were vision casting probably back in 2015, 2014, like when you started your YouTube channel. It's like sometimes that sustenance is so, I felt so in and out of the sport, the last 2 years as well. And it's just like, it's weird, but competitions have like such a long lasting, it's like a long lasting stimuli of like, oh yeah, this is my community, these are my people. But then at some point, if there's no more competition, do you feel like that's been the biggest thing that got you back on your game motivation wise? It's like when the competitions came back.
That was definitely part of it. I think for me, just like changing up the way I was training. I think I don't know, underwent like some sort of maybe like physiological change over the last like few years, or maybe just, added some other out of the gym stressors and things like that. But my recovery capacity in terms of how much work I can get away with doing, I think just like kind of tanked for some reason. So I think part of it was finding like the right amount of work that I could do and recover from. And it was kind of like, as long as I can do some work and I can recover from it, then I'm on track. You know what I mean? Whereas I think previous to that, we kind of had this concept of how much I needed to do, and it held true for a long, long time. But I think that kind of changed on us at some point. So it's definitely been a bit of an adjustment. I think the other big adjustment that I made during the pandemic was, obviously deciding to take a step back from Equipped for now, just because I didn't have the capacity to like do that alone, or, the wherewithal or fortitude or whatever, however you want to look at it. It just like wasn't going to happen. I think I did one day when my hip was really bad and I just needed a win. I threw my suit bottoms and knee wraps on and just like squatted something way bigger than I otherwise would have, just to like feel it on my back, and it felt good and whatever. But other than that, yeah, I haven't done anything Equipped since like March 2020. So
do you, with the hip, because obviously that can be, so there's a few things I want to touch on there, because there's a lot of similarities in terms of like things my lifters have said, and myself included, like work capacity just dropped. And then kind of sometimes I'm like, oh, I can do it all again. And then it drops again. But in regards to your hip, like, I mean, you've been battling, I don't want to say battle, like it's just been part of your life. Like, yeah, battling. Okay. For a while, right? Like I remember 2016 even was when it first started, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. It was like late 2015, early 2016. And it's kind of just like been a thing since.
Yeah. I imagine, how do you manage the stressor of like having these, I imagine, pretty big goals with your own performance, and like the pressure of the competition is coming up, and then maybe you have like a hip flare up, like how do you manage that stress requirement to then, like, because usually when you're recovering from a hip injury, it's like you got to do less work. But then like you have a competition coming up. So how have you and Mike, I guess, managed that duality?
It's been kind of like my hip is kind of anomalous. Like I've never, I got every imaginable imaging treatment. You know, I had dye injected MRI in my hip and my back. I had X-ray, I had ultrasound. I saw multiple physiotherapists. I saw a few sport med doctors. Like I had traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture done at one point. I had is it like dry needling where they like put it in and move it around? It's like I did all that kind of crap. Had chiropractic treatments every, 2 days for a year, and just like nobody was ever able to tell me what it was or what an actual course of treatment would look like. And I ended up at a point where I had a few conversations with Alex Kowaleski from Barbell Medicine, and he was just kind of like, you know what, man, it's probably like the only way forward is through, in a sense. And one of the things that I found made my hip feel better was loading it and getting some training in that didn't hurt. And usually if I can string together a little bit of training that doesn't hurt, then I can ramp back up, and I kind of, the stronger I am, the better it feels. So it's just a matter of trying to get some stimulus on it that doesn't hurt, and then it kind of desensitizes and whatever. So I don't know if it's just like largely psychological at this point, or what sort of factors, whether tissue or otherwise, that lead to that happening. But I've been lucky with that not really lining up with competitions, and I think the one time it did would have been 2016 Worlds, and that's my best placing at a Worlds ever. So on the day, it didn't hurt. And again, that's why I think there's maybe like a pretty decent psychological component to it, because generally speaking on meet day, it's like not there, whereas in training, I'm banging out a set of 5 at a moderate intensity, and by rep 3, it's like, oh boy, yeah, this is going to be bad. But I've been pretty lucky with that, I think. And yeah, also like for me, working with a sports psychologist, I work with a guy named Hugh Gilmore. He's, I don't know, I'm probably going to mess this up. He's Irish or somewhere in the UK.
Oh yeah. But, he's the guy that discussed, he's the one I learned self-determination theory from, I believe.
Yeah. He's got some like,
he's like in the powerlifting world too, right?
Yeah. He runs a company called Podium Psychology, I believe. So
oh, cool.
There's been a few times, like I started doing sessions with him a couple of years ago, and largely didn't actually throughout the pandemic, but some of the stuff that we had discussed early on helped a lot. And I actually am talking with him again on Monday because I had a few sessions left. And but yeah, I think like because there seems to be a large psychological component to it for me, like trying to wrap my head around managing my own expectations for long enough that I can get to the point where I can train. But like the most frustrating thing is I feel like if I could just train normally, you know what I mean? Like if I could just do the work, I would love to strain and just beat the shit out of myself with volume. And like, I crave that stuff, you know what I mean? But it's such a tightrope or like a knife's edge to try to find that balance. So it's like, it's almost harder for me to rein it in than it is, anything else.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, was it scary for you when you and Mike decided to pull back on the volume? Like, did you think you're gonna get weaker, and did you get weaker? Like, what was the immediate response?
So I think for me, when we like really made a big change, and the biggest change was probably like I said, around November, would have been 2020. And we totally switched like programming styles. So he's got a spreadsheet that I use, and I plug in my recovery metrics, and it, spits out, okay, you're best suited for this workout today. So I have all these different protocols and different movement patterns, and it tells me, okay, I plan to do X pattern on whatever day. It tells me if I should do high specificity, low specificity, high volume, low volume, whatever, and how much stress to do. But basically that ended up with me, anytime I was doing heavy or like my A workout, my higher priority, higher specificity workouts, it was 2 to 3 squat singles, 2 to 3 deadlift singles. And that's it. Like, I don't think I touched volume of really any kind outside of some like SDE stuff, being like maybe some pause squats or SSB or something like that. But it was literally just singles. And I think I ran off that for like 6 months almost. And just like really slowly kind of built things back up, and then got to the point where I was, feeling pretty damn good into my last couple competitions, and matched my squat PR from like 6 years ago, which felt pretty good. Made some bench progress, and again, a few deadlift PRs. So I'm making progress. It's just anything but linear.
Yeah, like initially when you first tried that out, was there like what was the initial like strength metric? Were you initially maintaining your strength, or was that initial drop off in volume like a hit to your performance?
So it's hard to say because it came with like one of my hip flare ups, which meant I was pulling back intensity like well beyond even like rating true RPEs. I have a really weird relationship with RPE because of my hip issues. And it's like, there's like hip good RPE and hip bad RPE. And those are two very different things and very far from one another. So yeah, there's a lot of like interplay and bouncing back and forth with that. But I think that I pretty much just found a good starting point with that. It was a low enough amount of work that I was able to just progress pretty linearly for quite a while. So I was happy with that. Like as long as I can find that starting point, it's usually not until, sort of end of block or a ways into progression where I can actually find out like, okay, am I able to push past where I would previously sort of, find even like a soft ceiling? Or am I kind of held up where I normally would be? So, I can only imagine how much of a pain in the ass it is to look at my training metrics because it doesn't make any sense.
That's the one thing that I find about like the training metrics when there's a lot of psychological component to the response or pain is involved. And, you're looking back at the data and it's like you almost, the way that I've approached it has been more like, okay, like if I was coaching you, like Bryce, let's get on a call. How are you feeling? What is your actual response to this training versus like volume was this, performance went like that. So keep doing that because you might miss out on like, it went up, but I'm still in pain or like, but I want to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think because that's like the limiting factor, that obviously requires more focus in the planning. But yeah, it's definitely not the case where everything's like, this is this nice, neat little contained system that fits inside the box and we can just like expect inputs and outputs to match as they normally would. It's like just off the wall sometimes. But yeah, we've been able to make it work.
Has that experience changed your perspective on like how you coach your lifters?
I think it probably has, but it's been so long that I've been dealing with it and like changing and maybe very slow, small, imperceptible changes over time. But I think I've always kind of leaned more towards like I put a lot of emphasis and a lot of priority on athlete feedback and on even like athlete intuition. If a lifter tells me, pause squats, holy cow, they seem to like work super well, or I hate this movement and it doesn't feel like it's doing anything. And, because I feel like especially once you get past a certain level of experience, like these lifters know, they've been doing this for long enough. They know when something's working. They know when it feels good to go to the gym and they're recovering well. So if you can get to the point where you can suss this out from the athlete themselves and then use the training variables and training data to like back up those assertions and to double check those assertions and sort of conclusions, then I think that just provides you such a more robust system. And it also, I think, allows you to build a better relationship with the lifter, to allow the lifter to feel like they're being heard and seen and listened to, and like they're part of a collaborative process. And I feel like a lot of those things, came with probably me running into my hip injury and needing to think about doing things differently because of my own experience.
I feel it's like that adversity teaches you that like, hey, maybe these lifters that are signing up to work with a coach like aren't able to figure things out like on their own, or they're experiencing something that's outside of the norm. Like one of my like biggest gripes with like the coaching world or even just like the powerlifting world is sometimes we get so interested in like the latest Schoenfeld study about volume and hypertrophy metrics, and all you got to do is equate volume and you're going to get strong. Like, don't you understand? And then you work with a lifter and they're like, yeah, but when we add volume, this happens, like, I'm not progressing and I technically feel recovered, but it's like, there's more context and nuance to the actual decision you have to make. And like you're mentioning, a lot more into the psychology of the lifter, about what their like buy-in is, or you know, what they even just the exercise they want to try out.
Yeah.
The main thing that I find really interesting in like how you coach, it's like I watch your Twitch streams a lot, and I mentioned to you last week, like it feels like when you talk, it's like, yeah, that's what I would say. And it's like you're very attuned to like emphasizing, you know, that the movement isn't supposed to be perfect, but it should be, you know, efficient for that lifter. What do you think about like when you're coaching lifters, how much of an emphasis are you putting on like improving their technique? And you know, those lifters where you look at them and you're like, hey, I think if we change this, that it might feel better. And then they change it and it like doesn't feel better. You know what I mean? Like, how do you manage that with your own coaching when you're working with lifters and they have like this weird technique and maybe they're experiencing some pain? You know, how much of an emphasis are you putting on technique in that scenario?
So I think that first off, my emphasis with technique, or the amount that I put on it, is going to depend a fair bit on usually how long I've been working with the lifter. If I've been working with the lifter for a while, I kind of know, you know, what to expect with how they're moving, and they know what I want to see. And it's just like, again, it's like a really collaborative thing where I try to pick up on any time like an experienced lifter, you know, has like a weird rep or something. And it's like, okay, well, what, you know, maybe what mistake did we make there? And can we try to ensure that that's not going to happen again? As opposed to somebody I've just started working with, where it's like, okay, you know, I have these models in my head of what, you know, efficient technique looks like for somebody who's built like you or moves like you with limb lengths like you. Let's try to shift your technique more towards this model in my head and see if that works. And a lot of the times it works. And some of the times, yeah, they'll come back to me and be like, nah, that didn't feel right. And if I feel strongly enough about it, I'll make an exercise that uses that kind of technique or emphasizes that kind of technique, and try to like give them something self-limiting to force them into kind of moving like that sometimes. Or, you know, in the case of a like grip width change on the bench press, it's like, okay, well, I want you to try this wide grip stuff. So let's just program that as a separate exercise. Let's let that run its course and we'll see if it goes anywhere. And if it doesn't go anywhere in a couple of blocks, all right, you know, we can check that off and at least know that that's not the stone that we need to turn and proceed in a different direction. So I think it also is good to like let the lifter know ahead of time that this might not be the thing. Like, it's okay to come back to me and be like, dude, that feels terrible. I don't like that at all. It felt worse. As opposed to being like, you know, I'm going to tell you what to do here and it's going to be good and it's going to fix it. And like, you know, being a little less absolute, I think, with your advice for a lifter, I think can go a long ways into at least ensuring that you get honest feedback. And I think that's really what it comes back to, because some lifters will be like, okay, well, this is what I have to do. Feels terrible. My bench is going to go down for 6 weeks, but, you know, coach says to do it. Whereas I want lifters to be able to come back to me and be like, no, dude, that ain't it. And sometimes I'll not change a lifter. So I recently started working with this guy from Sweden, and he had a pretty heavy bench touch. And I was like, all right, you know, you got a good bench. He's like a 120 masters lifter. He had a pretty decent like sink to his bench. And I was like, okay, that's fine. We'll keep working with that technique as it is. But I did program him some like light touch long pause work. And he was like, oh, this is really hard. You know, he's like, but I'm committed to like working on this. And I was like, yeah, let's work with a light touch just on this other exercise. And then, you know, 6 or 8 weeks later, he's starting to use a way lighter touch on his comp bench. And he's like, man, my comp bench feels so friggin' good. And it's just one of those things where it's like, if you can let a lifter kind of experience that and then maybe like discover that for themselves, then the buy-in is, you know, tenfold what it would have been if you were like, I think you need to do this.
Yeah, it's tricky too. I mean, I think that's how like coaching really should be. Like,
yeah, trick lift isn't doing what you want to do.
Yeah. Well, it's like the collaborative process, like you're talking about. When I don't know, when I started getting into coaching, there seemed to be a right way and a wrong way to do things, and there's a right way to program, and there's a right block periodization strategy that you should use, and it seemed like once you had the answers, then you're good and you can coach now, and you read all the books. Luckily, like working with Mike myself for 5 years in RTS, like taught me so much about that not being true. Like everything is just a different tool to use. And, I remember when I first started working with Mike, he would like ask me questions that I thought he had the answers to. And he would be curious about my thoughts on them. And I was like, you're asking me? Like, I just started, why are you asking me? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would be like, okay, he actually cares about my opinion. This is really new because, before then it's like, if you don't know the answer to this, you fail the powerlifting coaching exam,
Yeah, gotcha.
You gotcha. Yeah. And it's like, it's really changes the game because there are so many lifters with different situations, different like material conditions, and ignoring them for like whatever the newest, coolest, like at the time it was like DUP was like the thing, and you got to do 8s, 5s, and 3s or whatever, rotate that and you're good.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but what's actually happening, and like how much of this is just survivorship bias? And I honestly struggle with that as a coach a lot sometimes when observing the successes of like other lifters, and like, and this isn't even like a shot at like the flex team, but it does seem like a lot of their lifters follow like a relatively high volume, a training approach, and they're getting, at least the people that I see, right, are getting really strong. And then I'm like, well, I kind of have more of a middle ground approach. My lifters, some have relatively high volume, some have low, maybe I'm a bit conservative. And it kind of makes me, in a good way, but also in a bad way, it's like, well, maybe they were right. Maybe the coaches back in the day were right. Everyone just needs to do all the volume, and that's how you get the most strong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, do you struggle with that at all? Like, I mean, and I know the collaborative process kind of helps mitigate that, but there are definitely lifters that will start with me and they're almost expecting like for me to have a lot of the answers right away. And like, I'll have an idea and a place to start from, but it's a lot different from what you would see the average, coach that's really talking about coaching protocols all the time would talk about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think, yeah, like I definitely bounce back and forth on that kind of stuff. And I think the mastery of those kinds of things comes from basically just trying to figure out which tool to pull out of your belt at what time. And I've had, like, again, some interesting interactions with clients recently where I've been using, like a bottom-up periodization model. I've been utilizing, like, leaning heavily on RPE for either like ramping sets or top sets to kind of set the E1RM for the day, giving a lot of agency to the lifter. And I've got a couple cases now where I've completely gone the other way. And it's like accumulation, acclimation, accumulation, realization, like very sort of standard linear progressions, straight sets across, hard percentage prescribed. I'm giving them their 1RM, and like have totally flipped the other direction with certain clients where I felt like, okay, we're not getting what we want out of this. And I'm seeing some like weird things with what we're choosing to load. And, we've been doing this long enough that I don't think it's just the lifter just being greedy or like being dumb. It's like something's just like kind of inherently not working here. So I'm going to take these reins and I'm going to like literally tell you what to put on the bar for every set other than, back or like whatever accessory work or something like that. Like, sure, whatever, go ahead. But for the main lifts, like really take the reins on those. And I've had a lot of success, switching up the model. Because again, I think that, sometimes novelty for the sake of novelty, it's not that one, protocol is better than the other. It's just sometimes something new allows us to drive a little bit more progress or to take some things out of the equation that were becoming problematic for whatever reason. But again, like having some level of mastery of all those different techniques and those different methods. And again, like knowing where to pull those things out, I think has been really big. But yeah, I always see, like, I see Joey Flex's athletes all over the internet, just like demolishing world record totals in training like 3 times a week, and, you know, squatting my heavy singles for 7s at 93 and like crazy shit like that. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely some kind of I don't want, not secret sauce, but like he knows how to work with those athletes, and he's got like a stable of really good athletes, and those kinds of athletes are going to be drawn to seeing that presence on social media. And, you know, it's just like this synergistic kind of like positive feedback loop. And I think that like, I think he's also pretty open about having lifters come to him that like his system just doesn't or hasn't worked for. Right. And it's one of those things where, yeah, I mean, he's got a way that I think he likes to do things. I think it's like, you know, pretty standard, pretty straightforward stuff. It's pretty, not cookie cutter, but obviously it's just like finding the right amount of volume and, you know, building these progressions, and then having this like insane level of buy-in from these lifters who are like, I'm going to go work with him because he's going to make me into superhuman. And being like, yeah, obviously, I mean, like, you know, just expecting that level of progress and then going in and making it happen. And I think it's just like that. Yeah, he's got a really incredible, really cool thing going with his lifters.
Yeah, I mean, and I like that the people that work with me are kind of in a different headspace too. Like, I don't know if I personally could work with a bunch of like diehard, you know, I want to be world champion powerlifters. Like, it's
probably a lot of pressure.
It's a different, yeah, yeah. It's like that going to bed every night, and you got a lifter that's just like, man, I got hurt, you know, but I'm trying to be the world champion here. Like, what do?
Yeah.
You know, and then you're like, I don't know, you know, like, damn. And I don't know. I definitely like to build in a little bit more psychological flexibility with like my system, but I just find it, and that's why I really like listening to kind of your takes, and like why I like watching your content, because you have obviously experienced some of the adversity, but then you've also had that similar drive to be, you know, the strongest that you can be. And so like to have that level of nuance with your conversation is like, I think not only myself, but a lot of other lifters can relate to it, because it's like they've tried the max effort, max volume, you know, all of the 7s and single 8 protocols, like with, you know, 6 sets of 5 on their back off or whatever the thing is. And then it didn't work for them. And then it can feel kind of ostracizing, especially if if your whole news feed or whatever is super incredible powerlifters that are dominating, and you're like, what's wrong with me? Maybe this isn't for me. And then you find, you know, someone like you where you're pretty open about the fact that isn't, you know, your training strategies actually evolve over time, as I think personally they should, based on how you're experiencing the training. And like you mentioned earlier, it's like at some point, some level of physiological change happened, you know, or combo of the psychological factors and like motivation and like what's going to get you in the gym at all, versus, you know, you can set up that perfect program or, you know, the most volume program, but if you don't do it, it's not going to, doesn't really matter. Right. And I just find that really, it's validating in my own, you know, internalized experience of training, but and also within the coaching process.
Yeah, I think that was probably that was the single biggest lesson I had when I was going through school, and like, you know, we had a strength training class. I did like a 2-year university program, kind of like a condensed kinesiology for coaches or for personal trainers. And we had a strength training class, and the guy who taught the class was a powerlifting coach. And we talked a lot about, you know, periodization theory and all this kind of stuff. And I definitely had in my head, like, this is what the ideal program looks like, you know, like it or not. This is, you know, peak performance. This is the optimal program. But at the same time, I started working in like a commercial gym, like a box gym, working with people who, sometimes didn't really want to be there, or were like dragging their feet for whatever reason, or, you know, didn't want to use a barbell, were like worried they were going to get too bulky and all this kind of stuff. And I very quickly learned that programming is so much more about trying to like accommodate the person and trying to get, first off, adherence, right? If somebody can't complete the programming, if somebody can't do the programming as written, then that's not always, the athletes or the lifters or the, general population want to get fit person's fault. A lot of the times that needs to be like a pretty collaborative effort. And it's the coach's job to take into consideration that, yeah, this person can only lift 3 days a week. And they've got like a brand new baby at home. They're not sleeping a lot and they still want to like go to nationals. So you need to make that work. And those are, I think, like those are really fun puzzles and problems to try to solve. And I get a lot of reward out of working with those lifters, and sometimes having them come back to me and be like, "Holy, dude, I'm getting strong training 3 days a week. Like, what the hell? I didn't think you could do this." But and then kind of maybe it feels good because I'm confirming my own bias that we can do things differently. Yeah. But it's cool to try to figure out those kinds of different puzzles and problems, and especially with lockdowns and stuff. I remember building programs for people who had like they didn't have a squat rack. So I had one guy doing like Steinborn squats for a year, like having to pick the bar up end over end onto his back. And it's like, okay, well, that's the limiting factor, not what he can squat. Because this dude's like a 300 kilo squatter, but there's no way he's Steinborning 250 so he can do volume. Like, it's just not going to happen. So coming up with things like that, or like, okay, this guy's he can only floor press, or, just coming up with weird, wacky, zany shit that people could do without equipment that would still help them at least stay prepared, if not become more prepared for, the sport that they love. So those were also some really interesting and fun puzzles to work through and solve.
Yeah, I very much agree. There's a lifter that I had during the pandemic. It's still going on, but during like their lockdown period, where it was actually like, wow, what have I been doing wrong? Because effectively all he could do was split squats, lunges, and like some dumbbell like overhead press and stuff in his little garden. And he did that for like 4 months. Like he would just do sets of 20, 25 or whatever on the split squat. And I didn't think he was doing as much as he was, because he just doesn't communicate with me as much. And then I check in with him every month. He's like, yeah, I've been doing it everything that you wrote. I'm like, wow, really? You did? Like, that's crazy. And then the gyms opened up again. And I was like, all right, well, if we're going to start testing, actually using the barbell again, maybe we should see where your maxes are. So we did. And we wanted to like create a custom RPE table. And so I'm like, let's do your 1 RM, 4 rep max, and your 8 rep max. And I was like, I don't know what they're going to be, but probably not very good. This dude's been split squatting in his fucking garden for 4 months. Yeah. And he's like, he does his 1 rep max testing, and he texts me and I'm like, hey man, I just hit like a 5 pound PR on my squat. Nice. And I was like, what? Like, we've been training together for like a year and a half, and and then we do like no barbell training for 4 months, and you go and hit a PR. Like, nice. Wow. Nice. Which actually gave me some insight though, for sure, because like effectively we're just doing some really high volume, low specificity training for 4 months. So it's like, hey, maybe we should lean into this. Like, maybe the reason why we weren't doing as well before was because the SDE work was just too much, and you actually need more SPE training, and some higher volume, higher rep work training, just minimal stimuli in between. He's like, yeah. And we did that. And I was like, and he started doing really well. I mean, he's at the moment continuing to hit PRs like 6 months, 7 months later, even actually might be a year later. Time doesn't exist anymore. Pandemic time is like, I don't know when anything happened.
Yeah, man. It's like,
but yeah,
it's 2023 now, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's really cool. And again, like I said, it's fun. It's fun that you mentioned like the confirmation bias, because I love it so much when lifters can do like nothing and then they hit PRs, just because I'm like, yeah, I told you guys, I knew there was something wrong with your ideal model. So that's cool. But I want to, since we have like a little bit more time, I wanted to ask you kind of about, like obviously we talked about your coaching for a while and kind of how you view it. How do you view like yourself within your brand, and like your brand within the context of powerlifting? And like, how did you form it to the point where you're like, all right, we're going to make the kick-ass videos, like, how did you get to that point? And then like, we'll talk about now where you're at with that in a second.
So I'd love to say that I had like this grand master plan and, just executed it. But, like I basically, I got to the point where I was training for bigger competitions. I won a couple national championships and was like, oh, maybe I can go to worlds. And so this is like 2015, 2016. And this is around the time I met Dylan, and he would come in and like set up his camera and film himself doing like dumbbell overhead presses and stuff. And, we'd chat or whatever. We were amicable. And then I'd check out some of his videos and was like, holy crap, like this guy's doing some really cool, really good stuff. And then we got to chatting the one day, and I was like, you know what, dude, you should come like film some of my lifters, and we can do like a lifter profile, and it'll be good marketing. And I can like put it up on YouTube, and 14 people will watch it, and maybe it'll drive business or whatever. I don't know how YouTube works at this point, like not a clue.
Mm-hmm.
And Dylan was like, oh yeah, okay. So we did a couple of those, and then he was like, you know what? He's like, I'm really good at this filming stuff and editing and making things look cool and putting it to music and doing all those kinds of like aesthetic and very Dylan vibe stuff. He's like, but nobody cares about my training. He's like, I'm not strong. I'm not like overly jacked and shredded. And he's like, I don't know that I am like a good like mouthpiece either. You know what I mean? So he was like, what if I film and we follow your lifting, because like you're going to the world championships, you're training with these like cool weights and, attempting world records and stuff like this. He's like, why don't we try to combine these two things? So I think the first thing we kind of formally did as Calgary Barbell, into the first step of what this iteration is anyways, would have been some like training vlogs leading into 2016 worlds. And it just like, the response was pretty overwhelming. There wasn't a whole lot of, I don't think like powerlifting specific content like that. There was a lot of fitness content. There was a lot of really good educational content around powerlifting, but not necessarily like that kind of like more stylish, more entertaining content around powerlifting. So we did, I don't know, a number of those. And then I did one where I talked a little bit about, I don't even know what the subject was, but I like had this thing in my head that I wanted to talk about. So we incorporated this, sort of, I don't know, rant or whatever it was. I was talking about lifting psychology or being thankful for your support systems or whatever. And people were like, oh, that's really awesome. You should talk about more stuff. And it just honestly, it just kind of snowballed from there. And then I realized just how useful YouTube is, like as a marketing tool, or in some cases, if you're big enough, like a secondary revenue stream and this kind of stuff. And in terms of like networking and meeting people and having all these opportunities. And Dylan like told me, he's like, yeah, no, this could be like a really big thing if we wanted to, push hard on YouTube. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, isn't YouTube just like a place where people host random videos, and had no idea the community aspect of it or anything like that. So yeah, we started leaning into it pretty hard, and it just grew and grew and grew. And we had a couple of really big collaborations and a couple of really big shout outs from other creators. And it's gotten to the point where it is now. So I don't know. In terms of the branding stuff and like how we got here, I think more than anything, and this is going to sound, I don't know, whatever. It'll sound like what it sounds like. I just do what the fuck I want to do. Like I literally just like if I want to do something, or if I want to like incorporate a certain part of my personality into things, like if I want to do 3 back-to-back apparel drops that are designed by people who have done like underground metal album art that I really like, we're just going to do that. You know what I mean? And it's like, some people will dig it. Some people will be like, dude, can we get the circle logo? Like, I don't know about this, but I'm just going to do what I want to do. You know what I mean? So that's the long and short of it at this point.
So like now that you have the studio, so let's talk about your studio. Are you calling it a studio? Like, is that kind of what it is for you?
Right,
like,
it's the studio, it's the office, it's the gym. I don't know. It's kind of like this amorphous creative space for Dylan and I. The vision is that, yeah, it's mostly a studio. We've got the gym here, like my wife and my brother and his wife and some like other people come and train every so often. But it's not open to the public and we're not doing memberships, at least at this point. That's, not out of the question for the future, but we want to sort of situate ourselves in here before we start worrying about making other people a space.
Yeah.
But out of the pandemic and, the gym that we were at, the culture changed a lot. The membership changed a lot. And, during the pandemic, the gyms would be open and then closed and then open and then closed. So it was a really like sacred place for a lot of people. And they, it was a lot of people's release or, catharsis or therapy or whatever. And I think people really needed that space. And we didn't want to go in and be like, okay, we're going to mess with the lights and we're going to turn down the music and I'm going to take up this half of the gym for like 4 hours this afternoon because we were, we feel like we should sort of default to letting the people who were there use the gym for a gym. Like they're the priority. And, we just like had our home offices and we drive back and forth and we're kind of all over the place. And then we'll forget something at the gym and Dylan will have to bring his, van full of camera equipment to wherever we go to film. And it just got to the point where we're like, okay, like we're doing well enough as a business that, maybe we could afford to look into a space. Let's start looking. So in June-ish last year, we started looking and we took official possession of this place not possession. We commenced our lease on December 15th. So we've been here just over a month now, but yeah.
Do you guys have anyone else that's working on the content? Is it just you and Dylan?
No, it's just me and Dylan.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Cause obviously the content is good. How do you plan the videos? Do you like do scripts or do you like, hey, I have this idea, let's go do it. Dylan, set up, let's go.
Kind of depends. Like we have a vision for the video and sometimes the vision is that it's going to be an off the cuff, like film in 10 minutes, edit in 15 and throw it up kind of like tips and tricks video because I got this thing that I've had to like, a lot of the times it's like, oh, I had to, tell 4 clients this cue or I had, a ton of these Form Check Friday submissions are all for the same thing. Let's just like do a quick and dirty, 5-minute video about this cue and why I give it and what it fixes and whatever. Other times it's like, okay, we have this big sort of more robust topic we want to discuss. And in that case, we'll write out like a detailed script. We'll come up with a shot list. We'll try to like do 4 or 5 revisions of the script to like edit it down. And then I'll try to, essentially make the script into point form because I don't like reading the script. I'd rather just kind of use that as general talking points and hopefully I hit everything, but often things get left off. But we kind of come up with which style of video it's going to be ahead of time and then pursue it in terms of the planning or lack thereof as a result of sort of what we decide on.
Do you have a video or a piece of content that you've made that you're like the most proud of?
There's a few that I think are like really sort of representative of what we can do. Obviously that the Powerlifter, the documentary that we did, we had a big budget, ton of planning, and we're able to like really go pretty hard on that and make it kind of as far reaching as we wanted, in terms of like what powerlifting means to me and where it's taken me and who I am because of it and all these kinds of more like, I don't know, philosophical sort of ideas. And then there was a video we did on nutrition that I think is one of my favorite videos on our channel. And it was just like, all right, if you want to gain weight or you want to lose weight, whatever, you need to track calories. Here's how you're going to do it. It was just very like, I think we did a really good job of being like really efficient with time and really efficient with words, which I'm not always. Sometimes I say way too many words to say a really simple thing. I tend to jabber. But yeah, I think that was an example where we kind of did a good job of making that a little more truncated and really kind of entertaining and smooth and to the point.
Was it the one you did, how I manage my diet, or hard gainer, try these bulking tips?
The other thing is our video titles sometimes drive me crazy, but
yeah, because you have to, be somewhat like clickbaity, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's hardly clickbait, but
It was can't gain
I
weight,
find
do this.
yeah, okay, cool. I'll watch that later. I don't think I've seen it yet, but yeah, the thing with YouTube, obviously, how much time are you spending on like creating the thumbnails? Like, how much planning do you go into like the post production aspect of that?
Thumbnails
You know what
are
I mean?
like,
Yeah, like thumbnails.
I think Dylan has like weekly nightmares about thumbnails. And
Really?
spends so much time on thumbnails and titles and stuff like that, because that's such a huge part of just getting people to click it. And that's, that's everything, right? Because we feel like we do a really good job with the content itself. And if we can get you to click it,
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to enjoy it, that you're going to get something out of it, that it's going to be good. But getting people to click it in the first place is like an insanely like cutthroat kind of industry in and of itself, that often, requires some like nearly shady or very shady in some circumstances, kind of like not quite lies, but little fibs about some things that may or may not have happened. And it just is tough. And then you have to try to catch somebody's eye with things. So when we notice like trends in, these videos that we like title like this, or that we put thumbnails that look like this on, they seem to do better, then it's just like coaching. We like lean into that because we have these inputs and we have these outputs. We're trying to maximize the outputs. So we like look at
Mm-hmm.
how these different things are performing, and then we adjust our formula based on that and try to pursue the avenues that are performing better.
So then, what's the goal with the studio? I mean, do you have any big visions, like similar to like the Powerlifter documentary? Like, how big is your current understanding of where you want to take the channel and like with the studio?
So I think I don't know if we have plans to do like a Powerlifter 2. That's kind of always been a thing that we're like, yeah, at some point, like we'll kind of do something more long form like that. I think the biggest thing is just to get into a workspace where we can be more collaborative and be that in real time, and to make our lives more efficient, and to be able to, take as much time as we want with setting the lighting. We got very specific lighting specs out in the gym. They're a certain Kelvin and they're a certain height, and we have dimmers, and we had them set up on switch banks so that we can turn them on and off like exactly where we want and have the lighting exactly the way we want it. So just to be able to have that level of control and have that level of time where, we can put as much or as little time into a video as we want. So I think for us, it was in large part, it was just trying to get the freedom to do like what we think we can. Because I feel like we had that with the Strength Edge at first, because it was probably 80% were clients of mine that were in their training. So there was a great rapport. You could come in and like people just like shit talk you or like do something stupid in the back of the shot or whatever. And it was this like really awesome kind of community and all based around people that I had kind of brought there. So everybody understood, and it was, it was all good. And then when a lot of those lifters either made home gyms or over the course of the pandemic, like didn't continue with lifting or whatever, and a lot of new people came in because there were only so many gyms that were open, and, so many that were small enough that it was, maybe a little less stressful to go there. Then it became like, okay, we're not like, this isn't what it was. So we need a place where it's our own and we can do all these things the way that we want to do them. So, I don't know if we have like a big vision with it, but we know what we want from it. And I think once we're set up to do all those things that we have in mind, I think we'll be able to do some like big things and continue heading in the right direction.
Do you ever like, since you've been on YouTube, what, for 5 years now? Right?
Yeah, 5, 6-ish, something like that. I don't know how old our oldest video is.
Yeah, I think I saw it's like 5 years or something. 7 years ago was your 100% raw meat in 2014, and then the next one was squat tips and tricks.
Yeah, so about 5 years ago when we started like the the like Road to Worlds series and that kind of stuff.
So how do you keep making content about powerlifting? You know what I mean? Like 5 years worth of powerlifting content, like how do you keep making it? Like, at some point are you like, all right, I've said it all? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a real thing. But I also think that because of the way that YouTube works, a lot of the times, like, we can go back and do something better or update something. Like we did that So You Want to Be a Powerlifter series, where we tried to like lay out sort of the entirety of like what the sport entails, how you would participate, what to look for in your area, how to find a gym, what the rules of the competition are, et cetera, et cetera. Something like that is something that we want to like now update and do a better job of and recreate. So in some cases it's recreating old stuff. And in other cases it's a little bit more spontaneous in terms of, like vlogging something or coming up with a new topic or way of thinking about or talking about things, trying to explore new avenues, that we haven't talked about. We've got a big sort of like pain, science, and injury in powerlifting video planned, where I can, hopefully really go into detail about my hip and really go into detail about how I've managed it and how I've helped other lifters manage stuff and a lot of the science around pain. So I think as the field of powerlifting continues to evolve in terms of what people are looking at and what's, under the microscope, literally and figuratively, I think that gives us a lot more stuff, as well as, I think we can get more into maybe some like home gym or like gym construction stuff. We can talk about building the platforms or building the sound panels and, just kind of suss out, I think, what people are interested in, and continue to like translate a lot of the coaching that I'm doing on a more general scale into our YouTube.
The last idea I wanted to talk about is like kind of related to the current state of powerlifting. I don't know how much Canada is like impacted by like USAPL changes and IPF changes and stuff like that. But I know you guys are impacted like by the pandemic, and I don't know what like lifter turnout is like, but how do you feel about the current state of powerlifting, and what do you hope to see with it in the future? If you had a choice, like if you could direct where it goes, you know what I mean?
So I think as to what I think about the current state of powerlifting, I think, and I was pretty like public about this during the USAPL IPF split. I think it's unfortunate for the lifters that there was no resolution that they were able to find. And I'm biased towards the IPF. I think that in terms of the whole drug testing debate, I think the IPF's drug testing is superior. And I think there could have and should have been a way to apply that to the USAPL lifters. I hope that Powerlifting America is super successful. But the long and short of it, and kind of the end or conclusion of it, is it's unfortunate to see things fracture and splinter further in a sport that's already divided into 1 million different federations with 100 different classic and classic raw, and then raw with wraps, and then a deadlift bar here, and then all that kind of stuff. So I think that at some point, that lack of standardization hurts the sport. But you look at the flip side, and there's Olympic lifting or weightlifting, and there's no untested division, and I think there probably should be a place where people can do that and go and Olympic lift, so that the culture of the higher levels of that aren't just like infested with, passing the test is part of the sport kind of thing. So I don't pretend to know what the solution is. Like I'm not a brilliant social organizer. But yeah, it sucks to see more divisions and more anger and more fracturing within the sport. As far as what I would like to see from it, I don't know, man. Like I don't know that. So I don't think powerlifting is ever going to be in the Olympics. I don't think that's, at least not in our lifetime. I just don't think it's going to happen. At the basic level, like I want people to be able to go and compete where they want to compete and do it the way they want to do it. So maybe having different places for people to do that is great. But in the long run, like I want to see the sport grow. I want to see, more people with barbells in their hands. I want to see more people interested in using powerlifting as a way of, enhancing their quality of life and, prolonging their strength into older age and all those kinds of things. And I want to see like a really, really sick contingent of masters lifters in another 10 years. Like I want to see masters 2 and 3 just like insanely competitive, because all of us guys who just like don't know how to live any other way are going to just keep competing until our limbs literally fall off. But like, I'm looking forward to that shit. I can't wait. So yeah, at the core of it, I just am stoked for people to lift and compete and do the damn thing and train and just all of that, all the ways that adds to people's lives.
Yeah, it'll be really cool to see like what Powerlifting America can do, because I'm in the same place. It's like, it seems like USAPL wants to turn powerlifting into CrossFit in like kind of like the super mass marketing of it and just super showboaty, I guess. And I mean, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but it seems like, yeah, like you said, it seems like the fracturing is just the worst part. But the overall growth of powerlifting, if it can take off too, then like even our jobs become more meaningful. We have more people that want to learn from us, and I think that'll be really good for society in general. Like powerlifting is one of those sports where, despite the fact that it's like super, it can feel very individualistic, but like if you actually look at it, it's like purely community driven. In fact, like you participate on your own, but you don't really participate on your own because you need like volunteers and you need coaches and you need gyms to open. Like you need so many things to come together. So that's kind of that's effectively where I would see it too. It's like the overall growth just killing it. And I mean, imagine if they're like 15 Dave Ricks, like in the Masters in the next coming years. It's like everyone in the Masters Federation division is like squatting 650 and able to keep up with like a young Jesse Norris. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah. And I think that's like exactly where we're headed. Except I think that the young guys are just going to keep pushing that envelope too. Like you look at, guys like Jesus and, just any of those other lifters that are that age and just like absolutely pushing the envelope. I think we'll continue to see that get more and more intense and better, as well as see the Masters divisions like really filled out with more lifters and more competition, which is, I think, super exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that kind of covers it today. Cool. Is there anything else you want to add?
Not really, man. No, I think that was a good chat, good conversation.
Yeah. Dylan, you missed out on this, but I wanted to give you a shout out because I know you're a big contributor to the channel and like the creative direction, and I think it's just so cool what you guys are doing.
Thank you. I try hard, but I feel like it's been so long since we filmed videos that I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah, he's out of practice.
Well, because you're creating this like mecha studio that is like part gym, part like perfect lighting and like perfect design and all that. Like it's pretty cool, man. Like if I ever get the chance to come up there and just like do a video over there or something, it would be like, because I got this softbox over. I don't know if you can see it, but I have this softbox here, and like that's about all I have. If I could have a big gym like that and just make sick content. I mean, I have to start making content first. Now I just have all this tech that I'm like, all right, I got this. I have the things now. My first video is gonna be so good, But yeah, it's really cool. So I think it's awesome what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Definitely come visit anytime you're up north, man.